Welcome back. Today I have the honor of speaking with Howard Stevenson. Howard is often called the Father of Entrepreneurship. Over more than 40 years at the Harvard Business School, Howard shaped how the world understands entrepreneurship, defining it as the pursuit of opportunity beyond the resources you currently control. He's also co-founder of the Baupost Group, a prolific author, and a mentor to countless leaders, and that's in academia and in business. And in our conversation, we'll explore what entrepreneurship really means, how success should be measured, and why growth and impact don't stop at retirement. In all the years that you've taught entrepreneurship, first of all, when you started your journey on teaching entrepreneurship in the 80s, the word really wasn't heavily used at that time. It seems to me that in those days, that entrepreneurship was something you didn't hear spoken a lot about. For me, growing up in a blue-collar environment, it was either you worked for a big business, you worked in civil service, you worked in small business, you worked in retail, but no one talked about becoming an entrepreneur then. It was in the 80s, I think, when you started your work at Harvard, and when the then accounting firm Ernst & Young created the Entrepreneur of the Year program as a relationship building marketing campaign for them that really popularized the term entrepreneurship. Is it something you knew growing up, or is it something you came to?
I saw success and failure. My great-grandfather was a success. My grandfather and father were not so much. But what you learned was that the traditional definition of entrepreneurship was Richard de Catillon back in the 1700s. He said the entrepreneur buys at a certain price and sells at an uncertain price and bears the risk of the transaction. So a lot of the nonsense was about risk taking. I don't know about you, but I hate risk. I find a way to get people to invest or to work with me where they're doing what they want to do anyway, and you're sharing the spoils with them. And I think there was an attitude toward risk that you can't be an entrepreneur without risk. It's sort of like the nonsense that's going around in the investment community now. Well, if you want more return, you got to take more risk. No, if you want more return, you got to look for things that are, shall we say, different than the crowd. Well, in teaching entrepreneurship, what I would say is Alfred North Whitehead said there are 4 different kinds of aims of education. One is the transference of knowledge. But I think back to my experience at Stanford, and most of what I learned is wrong, irrelevant, or incomplete for what I need in life. And so aims of education, of transference of knowledge, are actually very short term. Then there's skills. And I think if you think about Jamie or you think about people like that, they've got skills that they learn by doing, not by reading a book. Mm-hmm. You don't learn tennis by reading a book on tennis. You learn it by playing. You learn skiing by going downhill. And you learn how to deal with people by dealing with people. Then the second thing you learn is alternatives. And part of the problem in education now is we have almost a religion of self-interest with guile among the economists. And you can go through the list of various things. That I think that one of the things I learned very early in life, I had a math teacher. Wasn't very good at math, and I wasn't a very good high school, but at that point, but he'd ask us questions like, how many proofs are there of the Pythagorean theorem? And understanding there are different ways to prove one of the basic theorems of geometry was really an inspiration to say, I better look for alternatives. Don't think I've got the answer if I have one way. And then the last thing is, and this builds on your point, is attitude. And I think what I was trying to teach people is every situation can be improved. that you have a personal responsibility to bring about that improvement, and the experts and the experience may be wrong. It's either called arrogance or it's called wisdom. I'm not sure which.
And you talk about in your work, you've spoken about the fact that banks take the least amount of risk, the most amount of risk with the least amount of upside.
In some ways, their mistake is when they don't look at the downside and they presume that a balance sheet that's done by, you can name your favorite entrepreneurs is in the, anyway, I won't get into politics, but you take risk in everything you do. There was risk in staying on at tenure because if I were unhappy, that's a risk that exceeded my risk of not being able to find a job. And I think that a lot of what you do is figure out how you share the risk. I mean, this book is written about this guy, and one of the first cases that sold several million copies was about him starting a game business. And everybody says, well, games are very risky. And you go through and you say, okay, who did he get to help him? And there were 8 people, and you say, what did he give and what did he get? And when you get through, you say, who took the risk? And the answer was nobody. I mean, the financier put up money only after he had fixed price, non-returnable orders. The distribution network was desperate for a product to meet Trivial Pursuit, and they couldn't get it because Sheldon Schweikto had a production problem. And what he did is went to TV Guide and got them to create a booklet of the questions, which made it possible. And then he went to people like Bloomingdale's that couldn't get enough Trivial Pursuit and said, don't you want this category filled this year? And the only caveat is you can't return anything, which was contrary to the way most game companies worked.
Today, how do you think about using your time? How important are relationships to you? And that's beyond the family. There's professional relationships, social relationships. How do you manage them now? And now with the newer social media tools that are available, do you find that helps you in terms of maintaining and investing in relationships or not?
First, I think anybody who claims 800 friends is crazy. And a lot of people are trying to check the box, I have more friends. So I'm much more interested in the 20 or 30 that I know, trust, and understand where they're coming from. And most of them are.
And you mentioned that one of your joys today is spending time with them, going out for lunch, dinner, just spending time with those people. Are you conscious of that mix and how you invest in that?
I wouldn't say I have a checkbox or check sheet, but I'm interested in people who think differently. And that leads you to not having people with the same experience. I mean, I think it's sort of sad if all you know are your friends at the country club, or all you know are your work buddies. I mean, you're getting the same thing over and over again rather than, without being pejorative about country clubs. I am. It's what I'm looking for is variety, because only with a creative dialogue and variety do you actually learn something.
At Harry and David, we work with our hands as well as our hearts, so you can enjoy sharing it as much as we enjoy making it. And that's what life's really all about, sharing with those we're closest to, no matter how far we are apart. Harry and David, share more. So as you sit back and think about all the different ways that AI is already changing our world, challenges would you have for an HBS student as they think about their career alternatives? What kinds of challenges do you put to them in terms of how they should be thinking about AI and how it's likely to change our world at an ever-increasing pace in the months, weeks, and years ahead?
One of the probably mottos is humans still matter. Judgment is not, a large language model is not a judgmental thing. It's a probabilistic extension of the words you use. And there's a good book I just finished reading called AI Snake Oil.
One of the other things that you talk about a lot, and I think it applies to friendships, relationships, Howard, is that being deliberate. You talk intentionality, and Eric writes a lot about your attitude about intentionality, and I think that applies to our social lives, to our relationships, being intentional about who you want to spend time with. And it's no secret, Harvard's known for their happiness study there that's gone on now for almost 80 years, I think. And the key there is always, what a surprise, they discovered it's all about relationships and to have more and better relationships. And I think we find ourselves spending time with people who make us happy and having less time for people who are always miserable. And it's sort of a self-selection process, it seems to me.
Absolutely. I think it's also knowing what makes you happy. I mean, one of the books I wrote is called Just Enough. And we had a question, which is why does almost every culture have a shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations? And that turns out to be an interesting question because there's rice paddies to rice paddies and blogs to blogs and clogs to clogs and anyway, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves. But what you have to do is say, well, what does success mean? And so we interviewed 140 people that were, by my terms, successful. I didn't interview some that, by their terms, were successful because all they cared about was one thing. And what was fascinating is I didn't ask them why they were successful because you get mostly the same nonsense about I saw the future, I worked hard, I saw it ahead of other people. You know, you can go, I'm sure you can give that list as well as I can. What we ask them instead is tell us about successes in your life. And when you got through, people talked about many different kinds of success. There's achievement, what you do against external goals others are striving for. There's significance, what have you done for others that others care about? There's happiness, how do you feel about yourself and your life? And then there's legacy, what are you going to leave behind? And you have to make choices. You can achieve highly. I mean, I feel like I've achieved in a couple of dimensions, but I'll never be a basketball star. I'm slow and short. You know, in happiness, you have to figure out what makes you happy and then try and intentionally follow it. For me, it's having lunch or dinner with friends, not a cocktail party. Don't sentence me to a cocktail party. But having lunch and you try and set aside time regularly to see friends and sit down and just have a good time. And significance, even Bill Gates can't give $1 million per person. He might be able now at the price of Microsoft to give $1,000 per person to humanity, but I don't think even Bill Gates can do that. And so you have to just say, even he has to decide who he wants to be significant to. And legacy is complicated because that's what you leave when you're gone. But what kind of legacy do you want to leave?
Well, that's the other part of it. What I thought was so creative about your recommendation was to think about your balance sheet and to include on your balance sheet the amount of money you've given away, raised or given away.
No, I think that one of the things that we try to say in Just Enough is you don't have to be happy all the time. In fact, happiness doesn't necessarily drive you to achievement. There's an emotional neuroses that most of us have who've achieved, and I'm sure you did in yours. But if you can forget it when you go home and be happy with your family, it's a very different animal. You have to choose how much happiness fills your, a lot of parents go to Aspen and see their kid that's a ski bum and they say, what are you doing with your life? And the kid says, I'm happy, Dad. You told me to be happy. That wasn't quite the message they were trying to deliver.
Howard, you've done so many things in your life, and the real treat is that one of your students and collaborators, Eric Sinaway, wrote a book here called Howard's Gift, which I was enjoying over the weekend. What an amazing collection of experiences. And I get the impression, while some of it may have been random, a lot of it wasn't. How do you approach changing the things you do? Some things you change, and others you're very consistent with. Your association with the Harvard Business School has been a very long one, and it's a spine throughout your career. But how do you look for your other adventures, the other things you choose to spend time on and get involved in?
It goes to what we talk about as entrepreneurship, because when we started teaching it, it was about startups and it was about weird personalities. And one scholar discovered that 43% of the entrepreneurs were firstborn. Turns out 43% of the population is firstborn. Not an amazing discovery. And working with the guy that we just finished a book on him, or by him, basically, we came up with this new definition of the pursuit of opportunity beyond the resources you control. And that, to me, has been the way I've lived my life. I started out as a scholarship student out of Holiday, Utah, and I always was looking for where were the opportunities. So entered the Chrysler Rodeo Contest, I entered Model United Nations, I entered the state math contest. I could go on, because I was always, one of the pivotal ones was an American Field Service overseas exchange program. And what's a guy from Holiday, Utah who speaks Spanish doing in France? And I learned a lot of, first I learned what richer people do. And secondly, I learned French. And third, I learned the benefits of a cross-cultural experience. And it's sort of been always my motto. I didn't realize it till I started teaching entrepreneurship, is what's an opportunity for me depends on time, it depends on resources, it depends on what I want at that time. I often say that if you want the same thing at 82 as you want it at 22, your name's Hugh Hefner. So that's been the driving theme, and it's, I think the threads are, I always want to learn, and I always want to earn, because I didn't come from a affluent background, and I didn't want income to drive me. I wanted assets to drive me.
It's and as a wise friend of mine once told me, marry a balance sheet, not an income statement.
Yes, I think that's been my motto. Is I know what a balance sheet is, and I want to make it better every year.
Have there been things that you've done in your life that you haven't enjoyed?
Not for long. Life is pretty short, although I've got 84 years on me now. But if you don't wake up and say, this is a good day, A, you're not being grateful for what you've been given already, and B, why are you doing it?
And the real gift is having the intelligence enough and the gumption enough to make changes when you realize you're not doing something that you want to do, that you're doing something that you'd rather not do.
Yeah. When I got tenure, I interviewed 40-something faculty members and discovered very few of them were happy. And what I discovered was a lot of them had climbed a little hill and they can see a mountain, but they were afraid to go down into the valley to get to the mountain. And I said, I don't want to be somebody who's stuck in a field that I like and started, but I wanted to grow more and learn more. And I think it's that, are you afraid to go down in the valley to climb the next mountain is a really hard thing for people.
And one of the things I've heard you say a couple of times in the past that you've written or that you've spoken about is the importance of marriage and the importance of marrying someone who's a happy person.
Absolutely. Without disparaging my first wife, I think that I found in the last 33 years somebody who views life very positively and is willing to take chances and has had experiences that weren't positive, but has always smiled her way through them.
Because you can't change them. If they're not a happy person, you're not going to change them, I guess.
I've tried, and it's And you have friends that aren't happy people, that somehow the glass is always half empty rather than three-quarters full. And I suspect you, as I, have been very fortunate to fill our glass many times.
Thank you, Howard Stevenson, for such a thoughtful conversation. His 4 dimensions of success, achievement, significance, happiness, and legacy, remind us to live with intention and balance rather than chasing someone else's idea of success. Howard's perspective is a guide for anyone looking to keep growing, keep contributing, keep writing, and telling their own story and a story of impact. Thanks for listening, and until the next time, keep pursuing opportunity, and as Howard says, keep moving forward.